Alina had always been the kind of person who tried to handle everything on her own, even when life became heavy. She worked as a graphic designer at a small studio, spending long hours in front of her computer, often skipping breaks and staying up late to finish projects. For a while, she told herself it was normal. Everyone was busy. Everyone was tired. But over time, the pressure built up in ways she didn't expect. Her days began to blur together. She woke up already exhausted, her mind running even before she opened her eyes. Worry followed her from her tiny apartment to her office and back again. She tried to shake it off, but the stress clung to her like shadows that would not let go. What made everything harder was the situation at home. Her mother had fallen ill months earlier, and Alina had taken on the responsibility of helping with doctor visits, medications, and daily care. She did it with love, but it drained what little energy she had left. It felt as though she had no space to breathe, no moment that belonged only to her. At work, she forced smiles and tried to stay focused. But she found herself staring at the screen for long stretches without moving her hands. Her coworkers noticed she was quieter than usual, though she insisted everything was fine. Inside, she felt like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long, ready to snap. Nights were the hardest. Sleep no longer came easily. She would lie in bed listening to the hum of traffic outside her window, feeling her heart beat too fast. Thoughts jumped from one worry to another. Bills, projects, her mother's health, her future, her past. Random fears that didn't even make sense. She tried breathing exercises, warm tea, even avoiding screens, but nothing seemed to calm her restless mind. One particularly difficult night, she sat on the edge of her bed with her hands pressed against her face. She didn't cry, though she felt like she could. The sadness no longer came in tears. It came as a heavy ache in her chest that refused to move. She got up and paced around her small room, unsure of what she needed. She wasn't looking for anything specific when she finally picked up her phone. She just needed something, anything to distract her from the weight in her mind. Without thinking much, she opened a video app and started scrolling. Clips flashed by. Cooking videos, comedy sketches, news reports, travel clips. None of them held her attention for more than a few seconds. She kept swiping until one thumbnail made her pause. It was a simple image, a calm night sky with soft blue tones, and the title read, "Healing Classical Music for the Soul Best of Beethoven, Mozart and Chopin." Lena wasn't a classical music fan, not in the active sense. She had heard pieces here and there in movies and ads, but she never took time to listen on her own. Still, something about the title felt soothing. Maybe it was the promise of calm. Or maybe she was simply too tired to keep scrolling. She tapped the video. Soft piano notes filled the room almost instantly. The sound was gentle, slow, and warm. She didn't recognize the piece at first, but she didn't need to. The music felt like a soft blanket being placed around her shoulders, unexpected, but welcome. Alina took a slow breath. Her shoulders lowered slightly as she sat back on her bed. She didn't expect it to help much. She told herself she would listen for a few minutes, just until she felt sleepy enough to lie down again. But something shifted. The longer the music played, the more she felt her muscles release tension she didn't even realize she was holding. Her mind, usually loud and scattered at night, began to quiet. Not completely, but enough that she noticed a difference. As Beethoven's gentle rhythms washed over her, she felt the thoughts in her head move more slowly, like leaves drifting on water instead of flying in the wind. She found herself breathing in time with the music, her chest rising and falling with each soft phrase. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt present. She lay back on the bed and let the music fill the silence of her room. The lamp cast a warm glow on the wall, and outside, the city noise faded into a distant hum. The space around her felt lighter, safer. Almost as if the music had created a small bubble of peace where nothing could reach her. She listened until her eyes grew heavy. The piano slowly blended with the night, and her thoughts drifted into softer shapes. She didn't fall asleep immediately, but for once, she wasn't fighting her own mind. She simply existed, held gently by the music. That night, she slept more deeply than she had in months. When she woke in the morning, The light coming through the curtains felt different, warmer somehow. She knew her problems hadn't disappeared. Her workload was the same. Her mother still needed her. The stress was still there, waiting, but something inside her had shifted. Even if only a little, she got ready for the day with the quiet curiosity of someone who had stumbled onto something unexpected. She found herself thinking about the music from the night before, the way it had calmed her without asking anything in return. After breakfast, she grabbed her bag for work, but before she left, she tapped her phone and saved the playlist. Not because she planned to become a classical music fan overnight, but because she wanted to hold on to that small moment of calm. On the bus ride to work, she looked out the window and felt her mind drift again. But this time, not in the frantic way it used to. There was still anxious chatter in the back of her thoughts. But it was quieter, like a distant murmur instead of a storm. At work, she sat at her desk and tried to dive into her tasks. It was still difficult to focus at first, but the memory of the music kept nudging her. During her lunch break, she put in her earbuds and played the same playlist. As she ate her simple meal alone at her desk, the soft strings and piano notes floated around her like a gentle breeze. She looked at her hands, slightly trembling from stress, and noticed them relaxing. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped again. She closed her eyes for a moment and let herself feel the music, not analyze it, not judge it, but simply feel it. She didn't know much about Beethoven, Mozart, or Chopin. She didn't know what the pieces were called or why they were written, but she knew how they made her feel lighter, calmer, more connected to herself. That afternoon, she finished her tasks more smoothly than she expected. It wasn't a perfect day, but it felt manageable, and that alone was a relief when she returned home that evening. Her mother was resting comfortably, and the house felt peaceful. After making dinner and helping her mother settle in for the night, Alina finally sat down in her room again. She hesitated for only a moment before pressing play on the playlist again, as the familiar melodies began. She felt that same soft sense of ease spreading through her chest. And for the first time, she found herself wondering if this music could become something more than a one-night comfort. Maybe it could become part of her healing, an anchor she could hold on to when everything else felt too heavy. She didn't know what the coming weeks would bring. She didn't know how hard things might become again. But in that quiet room, with the music surrounding her, like a gentle whisper, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, and that small feeling, fragile but real, was enough to carry her through one more day. She lay back on her bed and closed her eyes, letting the music guide her into another calm night. The sound was familiar now, comforting. Like an old friend she hadn't realized she needed. As the notes of Mozart drifted softly through the air, she felt herself breathing easier. Her thoughts slowed again, falling into a gentle rhythm. Her heart, which had felt so tight and tired, finally loosened. The music didn't solve her problems, but it gave her space to breathe. And for Alina, that was the beginning of healing. She didn't know it yet. But this simple playlist, the one she clicked on out of desperation, would soon become a lifeline. One that would guide her through the ups and downs ahead. For now. Though she only knew one thing, she wasn't alone anymore. Not with the music by her side. And as she drifted into sleep, the soft piano carried her into the quietest rest she'd had in a very long time. The next few days passed in a way that felt strangely lighter for Alina. The world around her hadn't changed. Her job was still demanding. Her mother still needed help. And her own thoughts still wandered into worry at unexpected moments. But something inside her had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even something she could easily explain. But the music she had discovered seemed to stay with her, like a soft glow that followed her through the day. One evening, after another long shift at work, she made dinner for herself and her mother. Her mother ate quietly, smiling now and then, grateful for the care Alina gave without complaint. After cleaning up the dishes, Alina found herself feeling heavier again, the exhaustion creeping back into her bones. She walked into her room, changed into something comfortable, and sank into her bed. The familiar feeling of tension wrapped around her shoulders, and for a moment, She thought the calm she had felt over the past couple of days might have been temporary, but then she remembered the music. Without hesitating, she reached for her phone and opened the playlist she had saved. The screen glowed softly in the dim room. She pressed play. This time, the piece that started was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Alina didn't know the name until she read the small caption beneath the video. But even before she knew it, she felt a shiver run down her spine. The opening notes were slow, deep, and full of emotion she couldn't quite name. She leaned back against her pillow and closed her eyes. The sound wrapped around her like a gentle wave. It wasn't just pretty, it felt meaningful. It's like the music understood something about her that she couldn't put into words as the melody flowed. Memories flickered through her mind. Not painful ones, just pieces of her life she had forgotten to feel. Childhood moments, small joys she had once had time for, things she didn't let herself think about anymore because she had become too busy trying to keep everything together. She felt her breathing slow again, each inhale a little deeper than the last. The tension that had returned began to melt away. It amazed her how quickly the music reached her, how it seemed to unlock emotions she had kept buried under stress and responsibility. The next morning, she woke feeling rested once more. She got ready for work with a calm she hadn't felt in years. The city felt a little brighter. The bus ride was still crowded and noisy, but Alina barely noticed it. She was listening to Mozart this time. His clarinet concerto and the cheerful, airy notes lifted her spirits as she listened. She watched the world outside, pedestrians hurrying by, shopkeepers opening their stores, sunlight catching on windows. Everything felt more vivid, like the music had sharpened her senses at work. She had a long list of tasks waiting, but instead of feeling overwhelmed the way she usually did, she felt steady. She worked at a calmer pace, focusing on one thing at a time. And whenever her mind shifted towards stress, she reminded herself of the music waiting for her later. During her lunch break, she walked outside to a small park behind her building. She sat on a bench under a tree, put in her earbuds, and listened to Chopin. His nocturnes felt like someone gently placing a hand over her heart, giving it permission to slow down. Alina watched leaves flutter in the breeze, while the delicate piano notes floated around her. She didn't check emails. She didn't think about deadlines. She just breathed. Something inside her softened. Her days slowly began to form a new pattern. She didn't plan, it simply happened. Mornings became Mozart's time. His bright, lively pieces helped her start the day with clarity. Afternoons belonged to Beethoven, whose steady rhythms grounded her when work felt overwhelming. And nights were for Chopin, whose gentle, emotional pieces helped her unwind. She never told anyone about this new routine. It felt like something personal, something she wanted to keep close for now. One evening, as she helped her mother prepare for bed, her mother looked at her for a long moment. "You seem calmer these days," she said quietly. Alina froze for a moment, then smiled softly. "Maybe a little." Her mother nodded, a gentle warmth in her eyes. "It suits you." After she left her mother's room, Alina returned to her own and sat on the floor, leaning against her bed. She felt a strange mixture of emotions, gratitude, relief, and something like pride. For so long, she had felt like she was drowning. Now, she was slowly finding her way back to shore. She played another piece from the playlist. This one was a Chopin waltz she had never heard before. The piano danced lightly, and Alina found herself smiling, not a dramatic smile, but a small, natural one that she hadn't felt in ages, as the music played. She picked up a notebook she hadn't used in years. A simple journal. She flipped through it and saw pages from long-ago dreams she had once written down. Sketches she had drawn absent-mindedly, thoughts she had forgotten. She grabbed a pen and began writing again. Not about work or stress or responsibilities, just thoughts, simple ones. How the music made her feel. How she wanted to take a walk this weekend if the weather allowed. How she hoped her mother would have a peaceful night. She didn't plan her words. They flowed naturally, every few minutes. She paused just to listen, to let the music fill the quiet room. She realized then that the playlist wasn't just helping her relax. It was guiding her toward parts of herself she had lost, the parts that felt joy, curiosity, and calm. Days turned into weeks. The playlist became part of her life, and slowly she noticed more changes. She slept more soundly. Her shoulders stayed more relaxed. She reached for her phone less often, choosing instead to listen or journal. She even took longer walks, letting the music accompany her as she explored her neighborhood. On one of these walks, she found a small cafe tucked between two stores. It had soft lighting, wooden chairs, and a peaceful atmosphere. Something about it made her stop. She stepped inside and ordered a warm drink. The cafe was on tea busy. A few people sat quietly, some reading, some working on laptops. Soft background music played, not classical, but gentle enough to blend with her thoughts. Alina sat by the window and watched the street outside. She didn't put in her earbuds this time. She simply enjoyed the stillness. Moments like this had once felt impossible for her. She had spent so long rushing, worrying, and trying to hold everything together that she forgot what calm felt like. But now she remembered. When she returned home, she found her mother sleeping peacefully. The house was quiet. Alina stepped into her room, turned on a small lamp, and played another piece from the playlist, this time. It was Beethoven, again something soft and steady. She sat on the floor once more and let her thoughts drift. Not in the frantic way they used to, but in a gentle, reflective way. She thought about the past month, about how a simple video, clicked out of desperation late one night, had become something important. She thought about how strange it was that music written hundreds of years ago could reach her so deeply, calming her in ways she didn't think were possible as she listened. She wondered if this shift in her life was only the beginning. She didn't expect miracles. She knew stress would come back. She knew there would still be difficult days with work and her mother's health. But she also knew something she didn't know before. She wasn't helpless. The music had shown her that she could feel calm again. That there was a softness inside her that hadn't disappeared, had only been buried. Before bed, she wrote in her journal again. Simple lines, simple thoughts, but they felt honest when she finally lay down. She felt warmth in her chest, not from the room, but from the quiet comfort of knowing she was healing. Little by little, as the music played softly beside her, she closed her eyes and let the calm wash over her. It felt almost like the melodies were guiding her, steadying her, teaching her to breathe again. She drifted into sleep, with a sense of peace she never thought she would feel again, and she knew this was only the beginning of her journey with the music that had already begun to change her life in ways she never expected. The change in Alina's life started so quietly that she didn't even notice it at first. It showed up in the way she breathed a little deeper, the way she paused before letting stress take over, and the way she carried herself through each day with a softness she had forgotten she could feel. The music had become her companion, her comfort, and her quiet guide. But she didn't realize how deeply it was working until she found herself facing emotions she had long pushed aside. One morning, she woke before her alarm. The sun had barely risen, and the room was still dim, but something inside her felt awake. Ready? She sat up, stretched, and let out a slow breath. For a moment, she simply listened to the stillness. Then, almost without thinking, she reached for her earbuds and played a Mozart piece she had saved. The soft, uplifting melody filled her room. She sat at the edge of her bed, letting the music wash through her. It made her aware of how tired she had been, not just physically, but emotionally. She had spent years running through tasks, responsibilities, and worries without giving herself time to feel anything deeply. But the music made space for those feelings. After getting ready, she checked on her mother, who was still asleep, resting peacefully. Alina made her breakfast quietly, leaving it on the small table near the bed. She wrote a little note, as she sometimes did, so her mother would know she had prepared everything. The bus ride to work felt different that morning. She watched the early sun reflect on the windows of buildings, watched people walking quickly to their jobs, watched cars pass by in a steady flow. She put on Chopin this time, a gentle nocturne that made the morning feel softer. She noticed a man reading a newspaper beside her. a woman humming quietly in front of her, and a child holding onto her parent's hand. None of these were new sights, but she saw them differently now. The music had slowed her mind enough for her to notice details again, to take in the world around her without feeling overwhelmed. At work, the stress still came in waves. A client had changed their mind about a project for the third time, and her team was feeling the pressure. People spoke quickly, typing loudly, moving from one desk to another in frustration. But Alina stayed grounded. She took slow breaths and kept her focus on the task in front of her. When she felt her chest tighten, she took a short break, walked to a quiet corner, and let Beethoven's soft piano soothe her. Just a few minutes of listening helped reset her mind. Her coworkers noticed she wasn't as tense as usual. But they didn't ask. She didn't offer explanations. She didn't need to. It was enough that she knew what was helping her. Later that week, she found herself thinking a lot about her past. Not in a painful way, but in a reflective one. The music had stirred something inside her that she hadn't touched in years. Memories came up, ones she hadn't thought of since she was a child. She remembered afternoons spent drawing by the window, the sunlight warming her arms. She remembered moments of laughter with her mother when she was healthier. Moments when they would cook together or watch old movies. She remembered things she used to dream about, hobbies she once enjoyed, simple joys she had forgotten. She realized how much she had changed to survive the pressures of adulthood. She had become someone who handled everything, who rarely asked for help, who kept moving even when she felt broken inside. The music didn't fix everything, but it made her feel again. It reminded her that she was still a person beyond her stress. One evening, after helping her mother settle into bed, Alina sat outside on the small balcony. It wasn't much of a view, just a few buildings across the street, some trees and the distant sound of cars, but the air was cool, and the evening sky was painted with soft orange light. She listened to Beethoven again, a piece she had grown to love. It was slow, steady, and full of emotion. As she listened, she felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sadness, but from release. The music made her feel safe enough to let out feelings she had held inside for too long. She didn't sob or break down. The tears came gently, sliding down her cheeks like quiet drops of understanding. She wiped them away softly and took a deep breath. The weight in her chest felt a little lighter. The next weekend, Alina decided to take a longer walk than usual. She packed a small water bottle, put on comfortable shoes, and stepped outside. There was a park nearby with tall trees and walking paths that curved around a pond. She hadn't visited it in years. As she walked, she listened to music, not constantly, but in moments, letting the melodies drift in and out. Sometimes she took out her earbuds just to listen to the wind, the birds, and the sound of footsteps on gravel. She found a bench overlooking the pond and sat down. The water reflected the sky above, shimmering gently. Families walked by, children laughed, and a couple sat on the grass nearby, their heads leaning against each other. Alina smiled softly at the scene. It felt peaceful. She opened her journal and began writing again. She wrote about the trees, the water, and how it felt to be outdoors. She wrote about the small calm she was rediscovering. She didn't worry about whether her words made sense. She wrote because it felt right. After a while, she put the journal away and simply sat there, taking slow breaths. When she closed her eyes, she let Chopin play softly through her earbuds. The music blended with the sounds of nature, creating a moment that felt almost like healing itself in that quiet space. She realized something important. The music wasn't just calming her. It was teaching her to slow down, to notice her own feelings, and to let herself rest without guilt. On her way home, she stopped by a small bookstore she used to visit when she was younger. She wandered through the shelves, touching book covers gently. She didn't buy anything, but being there felt comforting. It's like reconnecting with an old part of herself. When she arrived home, her mother was awake and sitting by the window. "You were out longer today," her mother said with a gentle smile. "Yes," Alina replied, returning the smile. "I needed some air." "That's good," her mother said. "I'm glad you're taking care of yourself too." The words touched Alina in a way she didn't expect. She sat beside her mother and talked for a while about simple things, the walk, the weather, memories from years ago. It was a quiet conversation, but it felt meaningful. That night, after her mother went to sleep, Alina went to her room and played another piece of music. It was new to her, but she trusted the playlist by now. The moment it started, she felt something inside her stir again. She lay back on her bed and listened closely. The notes rose and fell like waves filled with emotion. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to sink into the sound. Thoughts came and went, but none were heavy. The music seemed to hold them gently, easing the sharp edges as she listened. She remembered the girl she used to be, the girl who drew pictures for hours, who dreamed of traveling the world, who loved quiet moments. Somewhere along the way, she had lost that girl. But now, she could feel traces of her again. The music was bringing her back. Over the next few days, she felt a growing strength inside her. She managed work stress more calmly. She cared for her mother with more patience. She even found herself smiling more often, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally felt space to breathe. One afternoon, while walking home from the grocery store, she paused near a small community center. A flyer caught her eye. It advertised a live classical music event scheduled for next month. Students from a local music school would be performing pieces by Beethoven, at Mozart and Chopin. Her heart fluttered for a moment. She had never been to a classical music performance before. She had never even considered it. But now, the idea felt meaningful, like a step she wanted to take. She took a photo of the flyer and walked home, feeling a quiet excitement inside her. That night, she told her mother about it. "You should go," her mother said with a soft smile. "You deserve to enjoy something for yourself." Alina nodded, feeling warmed by the support as she lay in bed that night. Listening to a familiar Chopin melody, she felt a gentle certainty settle over her. The music had opened something inside her, something she hadn't known she needed. She didn't know what the coming weeks would bring, but she felt ready for them. Not because life had grown easier, but because she had grown quieter inside, steadier, more connected to herself. The playlist had become more than just sound. It had become her path back to feeling, back to calm, back to herself, and deep down, she knew her journey was still unfolding, one note at a time. The morning light came softly through the thin curtains, and he felt its warmth before he even opened his eyes. It had been a long night. Not because he struggled to sleep this time, but because he had slept so deeply that waking up felt like stepping out of another world. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet room, letting his breath settle before sitting up. There was a strange calm inside him, something he hadn't felt in so long that he almost didn't know what to do with it. He sat at the edge of the bed and looked around. Nothing had changed in the room. The small table near the window still held the books he never finished, the notebook filled with scribbles, the little speaker that had been playing the classical pieces he now leaned on almost daily. The world around him looked the same, yet his chest felt a little lighter. That small difference alone gave him enough strength to stand. He walked to the kitchen and made himself a warm drink. It wasn't anything special, just something simple that helped him start the day. As he stirred the cup, he noticed how quiet his thoughts were. No rush, no noise, no weight trying to push him down. He took a slow sip. Feeling the warmth spread through him, he had spent weeks listening to the music at night, letting it guide his breath, helping him rest, helping him let go. Last night had been one of the best. The soft notes had carried him like a gentle wave, and he felt as if the music had filled all the empty spaces that had once scared him. He walked back to the window and looked outside. The street was calm. A few people were walking. The sky had a soft blue glow, and he let the peaceful scene settle into him. Later in the day, he decided to step out. That wasn't normal for him. He usually found excuses to stay inside, but something in him wanted the fresh air, wanted to see the world again, even if slowly. He put on his shoes and stepped out the door, feeling the cool air touch his face. The street felt familiar, but kinder today. Maybe he was the one who had changed. He walked at an easy pace, not rushing, not planning to go anywhere far. The first place he passed was a small grocery store. It had been there forever, but he rarely went inside. Today he stepped in. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the light sound of people picking items felt comforting. He didn't stay long, just got a few things and left. But even that small interaction made him feel more connected to the world. He kept walking until he reached a small park. It wasn't big, just a quiet place with a few benches. He sat down on one of them and took a deep breath. There were two kids playing with a small ball, laughing every time it bounced too far. An older man walked slowly along the path, and a woman sat reading on another bench. All these simple scenes of life made him feel like he belonged somewhere again. He took out his phone and played one of the pieces he had been listening to recently. It wasn't too loud, just enough for him to hear the delicate piano notes. The music blended with the sound of the world children laughing, leaves moving in the wind, footsteps on the path. For the first time in a long while, he felt like everything was connected. He didn't stay in the park too long, but long enough to feel something shift inside him. When he walked back home, he walked a bit taller, breathing a bit fuller. This wasn't a sudden transformation. He wasn't magically healed, but something was growing inside him, something steady and hopeful. When he returned home, he made himself another warm drink and sat by the window once again. The room felt different now. He noticed the colors more, the quietness more, the small details he used to overlook. He grabbed his notebook, which had been untouched for days, and opened it slowly. On the first page, he saw a sentence he had written weeks ago, a sentence full of tiredness. Today he turned to a new page and began writing something different, something simple, something honest. He wrote about the way the music made him feel, how certain notes made him breathe deeper, how the soft strings made him feel safe, how the piano made everything slow down inside him. He wrote about the night before, how the music felt like a hand on his shoulder telling him it was okay. The words came slowly, but they came. That alone felt like progress. As the afternoon turned into evening, he warmed up some food and sat with it quietly. He wasn't thinking about tomorrow or yesterday, just now. After eating, he played another classical piece and sat with his back against the bedframe. The sound filled the room the same way it had filled his heart the night before. He closed his eyes, listening closely. The music painted pictures in his mind, soft shapes and colors that moved gently. He remembered the park, the little kids laughing, the older man walking, the woman reading. He remembered the way the wind felt against his face. These memories mixed with the music, creating a feeling that rested gently inside him. As the evening deepened, he found himself wanting to understand more about the composers he had been listening to. Not from a technical point of view, but from a human one. He wanted to know what made them create pieces that held so much emotion. He started searching for small stories, simple facts, just enough to feel closer to the music. He read for a while, then set the device aside and let his thoughts drift. He didn't feel the usual heaviness tonight. Instead, he felt present, awake. The room felt like a safe space again. Later, he turned off the lights and let only a small lamp stay on. The music continued soft, slow, warm. He lay back on the bed, letting the sound wash over him. This wasn't like the nights when he used the music to escape. Tonight, the music didn't pull him away from the world. Instead, it gently carried him into himself. He closed his eyes again, not to sleep, but to listen. The piano keys felt like tiny steps leading him somewhere calm. The strings felt like a soft blanket wrapped around his shoulders. The notes rose and fell like quiet waves, and he allowed himself to move with them. He realized something then. Healing wasn't something that happened in one big moment. It came in small pieces. In slow mornings, in warm drinks, in walks outside, in quiet parks, in handwritten notes. In soft music that touched the heart. He didn't know what the next day would bring. He didn't know if old worries would return. But he knew this: he had found something that helped him breathe again. Something that reminded him of gentleness, of calm, being human. As the final notes of the piece faded, he felt the day settle inside him. He turned off the small lamp, letting the room fall into soft darkness. He wasn't afraid of the quiet anymore. He welcomed it. He lay there, listening to the simple hum of the night, knowing that tomorrow he would pick up the music again. And slowly, piece by piece, he would continue finding his way back to himself, The morning began quietly, the same way many mornings had for him lately, but this one felt a little different. He woke before the sun had fully risen, the sky still holding that soft gray color that looked like the world was taking a slow breath. He lay still for a moment, listening to the faint sound of his own heartbeat and the gentle hum from the window. Nothing felt rushed today. Nothing felt heavy. He slowly sat up, stretching his arms, feeling the calmness linger inside him. He walked to the window and looked outside. The streets were still mostly empty, but the world was beginning to move. A light breeze pushed through the trees, making the leaves whisper softly. He rested his hands on the windowsill and watched the quiet scene unfold. There was something comforting about seeing the day slowly wake up. He made himself a warm drink and carried it back to the window, holding the cup with both hands. The warmth felt grounding. He took a slow sip and closed his eyes for a moment. It amazed him how something so simple, just a warm drink in the morning, could make him feel steady. For a long time, he had overlooked these small things. After finishing the drink, he turned on a soft piece of classical music. The gentle piano notes filled the space, drifting around him like soft morning light. He felt his breathing fall into the rhythm of the melody. There was no hurry, no pressure. Just the sound guiding him into the day. He decided to clean his small living space. It wasn't messy, just cluttered in a quiet way. Clothes he meant to fold, books stacked unevenly, a blanket draped across a chair. He moved slowly, not out of laziness, but out of peace. He folded shirts, arranged books, dusted shelves, swept the floor. And with every small task, he felt lighter at one point. He picked up his notebook, the same one where he had been writing about how the music made him feel. He flipped through a few pages, noticing how different his words looked now compared to before. The older notes were filled with confusion, exhaustion, and uncertainty. But the newer ones? They felt honest, calm, and hopeful. He smiled a little, not because everything was perfect, but because he had come a long way. He stepped outside again later in the morning. The sky had brightened, and the street felt more alive. People were walking with bags, talking on their phones, heading somewhere with purpose. He didn't have a specific destination in mind, but his feet carried him forward naturally. There was comfort in simply moving. As he walked, he listened to another classical piece in his headphones. The soft string section felt like a warm blanket, and the gentle rise and fall of the music filled him with a quiet strength. He realized how much these pieces had become a part of him, like familiar friends who stayed with him even on the hard days. He passed by a bakery he hadn't visited in years. The smell of fresh bread drifted out through the open door, warm and inviting. He stepped inside, not because he needed something, but because it felt good. The person behind the counter greeted him with a simple smile. He ordered a small pastry and sat near the window, watching people pass by outside. The pastry wasn't anything fancy, but it tasted comforting. He ate slowly, listening to the faint background music in the bakery. It wasn't classical, but he didn't mind. In that moment, everything felt peaceful. The world didn't feel overwhelming. Life felt manageable. When he finished, he walked back toward the small park he had visited the other day. This time, he felt drawn to sit on the same bench. The kids weren't playing this time, and the older man wasn't walking, but the place still felt warm. He sat down and breathed in the fresh air. He closed his eyes and listened, not just to the music, but to the world around him. A bird chirped somewhere close by. Leaves rustled above him. A distant dog barked. The sounds blended into a kind of natural harmony. He felt connected, not separate, not distant. He thought about everything he had gone through in the past months. All the heavy nights, all the restless mornings, all the times he felt lost. Those moments were still a part of him, but they no longer defined him. They were chapters he had lived, not the ending. As the music in his headphones reached a soft, emotional passage, he felt something warm spread through his chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was something in between, something deeply human. A sense of understanding, a sense of peace. After a while, he stood up and walked slowly toward home. His steps were not heavy like they once were. They felt steady, grounded. He wasn't walking away from anything. He wasn't running toward anything. He was simply moving forward. When he reached home, he opened the door gently and stepped inside. The room felt brighter now, even though nothing had changed. Maybe it was the light. Maybe it was him. He placed his things down and sat on the floor, resting his back against the wall. He put on one of his favorite classical pieces, one that always made him feel calm. The room filled with the music, and he let his eyes close. His breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. After some time, he picked up his notebook once more. He turned to a blank page and began writing, not about the pain or the struggles, but about the journey, about how the small things had helped him heal, about how the music had stayed with him when he couldn't hold himself up, about the park, the warm drink, the quiet mornings. His handwriting flowed more smoothly than before. He wrote about the peace he felt now, the understanding that healing wasn't a straight line. It came in waves, in gentle moments, in slow breaths, in silent acceptance. Evening slowly settled over the room. He made himself a simple dinner and ate quietly, feeling grateful in a quiet way. Not overly emotional, just calm. After eating, he cleaned up and prepared for the night. When he finally sat on the edge of his bed, he looked at the small speaker that had been with him through everything. He smiled softly and pressed play. A gentle piano melody began, soft and familiar. He lay down slowly, pulling the blanket over himself. The music filled the room with warmth. Each note felt like a soft reminder that healing was possible even when it seemed far away. He breathed deeply, letting the sound guide him, letting it wrap around him like a quiet embrace as he closed his eyes. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, not just peace, but hope. A gentle, steady hope that felt safe to hold. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he felt ready for it. Not because everything was fixed, but because he had learned how to breathe again, how to rest, how to let the world move at its own pace without letting it crush him. The soft notes continued, rising and falling like a calm tide. He let the music carry him, not away from the world, but deeper into himself, into a place where he finally felt at home. And as the night held him gently, he realized something simple but powerful. He had healed not by escaping, but by learning to listen to the music, to the world, to himself. With that quiet understanding resting in his heart, he drifted into a peaceful sleep, the music guiding him into a new beginning.